section. Welcome everybody to your free GMAT prep hour. My name is Reed Arnold. It is October 15th? No, it's October 13th. It is October 13th. He realizes it in the moment that the date is wrong, changing it as if this will affect viewers in the future, just so we're all not confused. It is October 13th, 2022. I'm here for your free GMAT prep hour with Manhattan Prep. If you are looking for other free prep options, we have it for you. You can try the first of our live course for free. That is 3 hours of class, 1/9 of the entire sessions. That's over 10% that you get totally free of charge. And I always tell people, there's no reason not to take advantage of that, even if you have no intention of signing up. We talk about data sufficiency. We go over some big strategies there. We talk about how the test works and just some big study strategies. We talk about sentence correction, some high-level approaches to that question type. So we talk about some really big stuff in question one. No reason not to take advantage of that at some point. Again, if you have no intention of signing up, that's fine. Come take a course with us. We'd love to meet you. You can do a similar thing with our interactive on-demand course. You can sign up for a kind of starter pack, a sample of that, see if that suits your liking. We also have free Foundations of GMAT Math workshops happening once or twice a month. I'm actually teaching one of those on Saturday, so I'd love to see some of you there. That's where we dive into the concepts, the mathematic concepts that the GMAT tests, but we also talk about them in a way that the GMAT rewards, or in a kind of thinking that the GMAT rewards. It's one of my favorite classes to teach. It's how I often really wish I'd been drilled in mathematics. I had taught the GMAT for many years when I first attended one of those courses, and I picked up tips and tricks, so I think even if you are scoring high, there's probably something for you in that foundations course. Just get you thinking about the foundations of math in a kind of deep, thoughtful way that will just bolster your overall understanding of things. So if you're looking for that, if you're looking for more free options, they are here. And then we have these courses. We have an entire library of free GMAT prep hours on YouTube. Look them up if there's a topic you're struggling with or want to dive deeper into. Almost guaranteed we've done something on it. And if we haven't, it means it's not as important as maybe you fear. So take a look at that, watch those videos. There's some really high quality stuff that we've put out. Really good tips for studying, for concepts, for strategies, all sorts of things. So take a look at our YouTube channel for that. Today's lesson is one I'm excited about because it's one I've intended to do for many, many months in a row and just never have gotten around to it. Today we're talking about untangling complicated text on the GMAT. This is a broad GMAT skill. It certainly applies most to verbal, but I think I'm going to make a point towards the end that it also applies to certain quant questions. In many ways, reading comprehension is the single most important thing tested on this test. The ability to discern information from the written word accurately and precisely is one of the key skills that the GMAT is testing throughout all sorts of question types. And so today what we're going to look at is some complicated sentences, pairs of sentences, and eventually paragraphs, and talk about how we might untangle them and find meaning and find the meaning that the GMAT wants you to get. This will be, I think, again, broadly useful. It's useful in quant and verbal. And I know in many reading comp lessons and videos and even some of the chapters in our books, we talk about reading comp and we talk about how in reading comprehension, you can skip the details. You don't have to understand the details. You can kind of skim past them, understand why they're there and move on. And that's very true. You can do that and often should. But there are definitely times where slowing down and landing on a sentence carefully and really picking it apart will actually be vital to the whole thing. This is particularly true in like the first paragraph or the first few sentences of reading comp. You really want to make sure you've grounded yourself well. So you might want to take some time to really pick apart that intro and understand exactly what they're setting up. Critical reasoning, the passages and the arguments in critical reasoning, you do need to be a little more detail focused. You can't so much skim over the details. It's important that you understand what the text is saying. In the answer choices of critical reasoning or reading comprehension, sometimes the answer choices are single sentences that are kind of gnarly and gross, and you have to understand what they mean to determine if they are right or wrong. And so what we're going to talk about today is just how, when we come across a sentence or a chunk of sentences that, as we all have, if we studied for this test, and if you haven't yet, you will, what we do when we come to one of those sentences and have that like kind of glitch in the matrix moment where it's like, we can read, everyone can read top to bottom, left to right, but something isn't clear yet. And we're going to talk about how to handle that and what we should do. So that's what we're doing today. Very excited again. I think this is one of the biggest skills that is tested. So first off, let's just think about why reading is difficult, right? When there are words in front of us, what makes reading complicated? Why are some sentences harder to parse than others? What makes them so? What's actually happening when we read something that makes us twitch a little bit, that makes our brain glitch? So I just want you to take a look at these two sentences. And just type in the chat or the question box what it is you think that makes one of these more complicated than the other. Okay, so certainly there's more detail in this second sentence. Okay, there's extra detail. It's longer. There's more words. As a comparison, comparisons are one of the biggest things that the test is testing. Again, it lurks in many different ways. It shows up in verbal and sentence correction. Oh, I meant to mention this. We are talking about single sentences today. And this will have some use in sentence correction, but just a warning, we're not doing like sentence grammar today. We're not doing sentence correction. Not that what we're talking about here isn't applicable, but just know that that's not what we're going to be doing when we look at these sentences. It's not for sentence correction purposes. But comparisons do show up in sentence correction. They show up in critical reasoning. They show up in reading comprehension. They show up in quant. That's what percents and ratios are. And so comparisons are just something that's lurking throughout the whole test. And the GMAT's really checking, can you compare precisely and correctly what is compared and in what way? Crossing such things up can make things more difficult. It's more convoluted. There's just more gnarls to it. Yeah. Yeah. All these are more or less the key here, right? The sentence on the left, the dog chases the cat. I see a dog, I see a cat. Dog's chasing it, no problem. Okay. This just has more pieces in it. There's this conjunction. There's two conjunctions, really. There's, a dog with a modifier. The chasing the cat is now a modifier. Okay. We have that comparison. Better. We have a comparison to dogs who chase cats to those who don't chase cats. Like all of these things are happening in one sentence. And this gets us to the key thing about these complicated sentences is that a GMAT sentence, for lack of a better word, has more thoughts. Okay. This sentence, the dog chases the cat, it's unithoughtal. That's not a word, but I'm gonna make it up, right? There's one thought in it, basically. A dog chases a cat. And then a more complicated sentence is not just has more words. What are words? What do words mean? Right? Why do we use words? To express and convey thought to other people. Well, a more complicated sentence doesn't give you one thought. It packs densely a bunch of thoughts in, and it's your job to kind of deal with it and untangle it to understand what the precise thought is in that crud. Okay, so the thing I want you to think about today, take a look at this math question for a second. I want everyone to just solve this math question. Go ahead and type in the chat when you have an answer. Good, Sonia. Well, good, okay. A lot of right answers coming in. So a lot of people are saying that this is 2. This is 2. But the thing I want to emphasize is that the way you answered this question, the way you answered this math problem, I guarantee it was, you might have read 1 plus 45 divided by 3 squared times 18 plus, like you might have read it left to right, top to bottom, maybe, but I bet that's not how you solved it, because you really can't. You have to do this problem out of order than the way it's presented, top to bottom, left to right. There's a few different options here, but you probably started with this. You probably did 18 plus 22. You said that was 40. You divided by 8, you said that's 5. Okay. Now maybe you then did 3 squared is 9 times 5. Maybe you divided 45 by 5. I don't know, but eventually you realize that 9 and 9 and 5 cancel out, and you're left with 1 plus 1 is 2. So even though this information is presented top to bottom, left to right, because that's kind of an arbitrary choice someone made when they invented English, other languages have gone other ways. They've gone top to bottom, right to left, right? All sorts of things. English chose left to right, top to bottom. I don't know. Total arbitrary. That doesn't mean that's the way you have to parse the thoughts within. And what this thing is, what this gross looking number is a pile of not comparisons necessarily. It's a pile of connections. It's a pile of numbers that are connected in some way. And your job is to parse through each connection and then see the connections within the connections, right? And eventually you parse down to what ultimately this thing means. It is 2. It's going to be a similar game with sentences, or I want you to start feeling like it's a similar game with sentences, picking apart a sentence as if it's a convoluted math problem that you have to do arithmetic in, and not necessarily in the order it's presented. That's kind of the idea. So the analogy I often use is you're like peeling an onion. The sentence they give you, or the paragraph, or the 2 sentences, whatever it is, you want to feel like you're working and crafting the meaning there, not just reading top to bottom, left to right, and letting the words come. I have students who will read, they start a passage and they just never stop. I've watched them do it. I watch them take practice tests sometimes just to kind of analyze what strategies they're using. And I'm amazed at how often a student will just start reading and not stop. And all the teachers I've spoken to, they emphasize that, no, I stop, I reread. Sometimes I stop mid-sentence and reread. I don't even finish the sentence before I'm picking apart exactly what's going on. So this is kind of a drill today to get us to start thinking about sentences as something to work on rather than something to just kind of read, absorb, and move on, because it's not that easy sometimes. Okay. I'm trying to remember if I had another thing to say before we did our first example. Yeah, let's see. If it comes up, it comes up. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to pull up a sentence. And what I want you to do is I want you to type this sentence in your own words. Okay, I want you to take the sentence. I want you to express it in your own words. I'm going to type examples as they come in. Pay no attention to them as you work on your own. By the way, this is a question. This is a sentence from an actual official GMAT critical reasoning question. All motifs. Okay, so here's what I'm noticing. First off, all of these summaries are one sentence also. Okay, all of these sentences, all these rephrases are one sentence. One thing I'm going to ask you to practice today is breaking these up, breaking these single sentences up into multiple sentences. Make it really simple. Try to break a single sentence into several smaller, much simpler sentences. That's not to say that these are bad or wrong. I just want to practice this because this is going to be kind of the skill today. Is we're peeling this onion. What we're doing is we're finding thoughts and simple thoughts and stacking them in a way that's more organized and clear for us to understand. So I want you to try that here. I want you to try to look at this. Excuse me. And I want you to pick it apart and tell a story about this sentence. You know, explain to a 4-year-old in a simple story what this sentence means. Take a minute or two to think about that. Sorry, friends, the recording has paused. Is my screen share back? Can you all see this screen? Thank you, support staff. I'm sorry, I missed that. Okay, see my screen. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. So I'll have to say, for those who are here, apologies. I'm going to do a quick rewind for the people watching the recording here. What we want to do is parse this single sentence into a story of simpler sentences and really understand the thoughts that are being built here. We know that mosaics appear in other Roman cities. And we know that, and motifs in the mosaics appear in other Roman cities. We also know that there are motifs in the mosaics of Sepphoris. That is just information from the problem. We have to deal with this double negation. And double negation, or just negation in general, is tricky. That's where you often have to pause and slow down and make sure you've understood. We either have that the mosaics, the motifs in these mosaics appear elsewhere, or that the motifs in Sepphoris do not appear elsewhere, that they are unique to Sepphoris. And so we have to think about, okay, no motifs appear in these mosaics that do not also appear in the mosaics. Well, if we negate no motifs, the opposite of that is every motif. Okay. There is not a motif that does not appear in the mosaics of other cities. That means every motif that does appear appears in other cities. And again, many of these were dancing to this. We did a good job in our one sentence summary, but I want to really work on picking granularly what thoughts are embedded here. Because what this means is that no motif, I shouldn't say no Sepphoris mosaic, but no motif in Sepphoris mosaics are unique to Sepphoris. Okay, every motif, I can't speak tonight. Every motif appears elsewhere. Okay, pick the pieces apart one step at a time and tell the story so that a first grader can understand what's going on here. There are some motifs that appear in Sepphoris mosaics. Everything that appears in those mosaics also appears in other mosaics around Rome. That's a much simpler way to say this in two sentences rather than this weird single sentence double negation. Okay, so I want you to try that again here. And the idea tonight is, again, tell these single sentences, turn these single sentences into basically like a short, simple paragraph of thoughts. Rephrase it to yourself in a simple, straightforward way. Pick the sentence apart. Try that here. Pretty good, Sonia. Could you simplify that last sentence even more? So one thing I like about Sonia's sentence, and I know you all can't see it, but she started at the end, more or less. She's gone certainly here first. She's gone to processors, the cashew processors in Kernland. And then she jumps to competitive. And by the way, I should also be clear, there's not one right way to do this tonight. There are a lot of ways to pick apart these sentences. Just because I'm focusing on one doesn't mean that it's the best way or the only way. Okay, but it's just a good way. These are the ones I'm going to I'm going to talk about. So what Sonia noticed first is like there are cashew processors in Kernland. Okay. They can sell their processed cashews. And this isn't going to be exactly what you said, Sonia, but it's started us off on the right kind of foot here at competitive or not competitive prices, probably. Okay. If they buy unprocessed cashews at lower than world market prices, see if I can break this one up, they can sell at competitive prices. Again, I see some people telling me one sentence summaries. We're going to really practice today breaking these into multi-sentence summaries. Break this into simple single thoughts. Even that third sentence I don't love. I'm trying to see if I can even break that up a little more. They buy unprocessed cashews. Like I even want to tell the story differently almost. It's like there are cashew processors in Kernland. They can buy unprocessed cashews. I almost want to go back to the beginning here. And again, this doesn't mean that anyone's specific way of doing this was wrong or right. I'm just kind of showing what I would pick here. They can buy unprocessed cashews at, world market prices or lower, I guess, or higher also, but I'm just going to worry about lower. Okay. If they buy lower, they can sell their product at competitive prices. I don't know if that's much better or not, but somehow that just tells the story of this Kernland cashew processor, what they're trying to do, right? They want to buy these at lower prices because it lets them sell their product at competitive prices. It doesn't, I can't, like if I'm getting into pure logic, it's hard to say that if they don't buy at lower prices, they can't be competitive. Technically, that's not necessarily true, but it does seem to be that's probably true. It's certainly true that if they can't sell their product at competitive prices, they could not buy them at lower than world market prices. But like live as this farmer, right? In this sentence, what's this farmer trying to do? This cashew, not farmer, processor, this cashew processor. They're going to buy unprocessed cashews, process them, but they like to get those unprocessed cashews at a lower price because if that happens, they can then sell at a competitive price. I presume that's a good thing. Okay, so we turn this one sentence into several. Let's increase the length here. This one is a sentence. This is not from an official sentence. This is one that I made up to be a gnarly, gross sentence. But it's really dense with thought. So pick apart and tell this story in single chunks rather than one equally complicated sentence. I made this gibberish intentionally. There's no hope in understanding this. You just have to pick it apart for its logical meaning. How would you rewrite this for a sixth grader to understand? So Vasu, that's a good that's a good reading comp summary, right? That's a good. I know you all can't see it, but this is what Vasudev wrote. Flip-flax were believed to be granulating until recent studies revealed otherwise. And that is like certainly if I'm reading this on a first time on a reading comp, that would probably be good enough to move on. But the thing we're talking about tonight is when we have to be a little more specific, when we have to dig into the details a little bit more and actually get them. That might be because it's actually not reading comp, it's a critical reasoning argument where the details are huge. This would probably not be an answer choice, and it's not meant to be, but answer choices must be understood. You can't glance over the details on those. And then certain reading comp questions, it'll ask about a specific thing that, yeah, on the first pass, you kind of could glance over for high level meaning, but now you have to dig into it. Now you do have to understand it. And so this is the kind of thing like, yes, excellent summary, certainly the main point of this. But if I needed to understand the specifics here for whatever reason, how could I pick this apart? We could definitely start with this comparison, right? That's definitely like the high level thing. Scientists used to think flip-flax were more granulating than bunsers. You can certainly start there. That's like the high level point we're talking about. Start the story there. Where would I go next? And there's no one right answer to this. Daniel, I see your question, and it's a good question. I'll go back to the previous question and talk about that. Okay. So definitely some good thoughts here dancing around it. So we have that scientists used to think flip-flax were more granulating than bunsers. Again, there's no one right answer here, but I would probably go to something like this was because bunsers have more humperdinks. This, by the way, is from The Princess Bride. Great film. If you haven't seen it, Prince Humperdinck is the villain in that movie. Very funny character. But now, like, just this thought alone lets me understand, like, remember, this is also helpful for making inferences, right? This lets me make an inference about what humperdinks do. If I really just parse this part of the onion, like, if they think that flip-flax are more granulating than bunsers, and this was because bunsers have more humperdinks, I can now see that, oh, having humperdinks, and maybe I wouldn't write this down, but like having humperdinks tends to lower granulation. That's the only way this reasoning makes sense. Flip-flax are more granulating because bunsers have more humperdinks. Well, that must mean humperdinks keep something from granulating, whatever this means. It's meant to be gibberish. So if you just pause at that moment and just make that inference, that can be helpful. Then we continue. Then it was discovered that bunsers also have lots of locomotors. Locomotors cancel out what humperdinks do. Like, we don't have to use the ungranulating effects thing. We know what that means. It's right. It's negating that, or it's canceling out this thing. Humperdinks usually lower granulation, but locomotors cancel out that effect. And yeah, there's other next rules, and that could be used to make an inference as well, but I'm not so worried about that for this particular detail exercise. This is the story that we can get. This is 4 sentences and kind of 5, one that's not officially stated, that we get from this one hellish sentence. Yeah, this is the good main idea if you're doing a reading kind of first read. But if we have to deal with the details and the why and the cause effect, dig into this thing piece by piece. And you don't have to start, I mean, you could start at the end. You could say that research has shown that bunsers have lots of locomotors. Locomotors undo what Humperdinks do, what Humperdinks tend to do. And what is that? Let's just say it, lower granulation. People thought that bunsers were less granulating than flick-flacks because of their Humperdinks. And now we can kind of get to the main inference that this whole thing is kind of driving toward. So this new discovery calls that into question. Now we're not so sure that bunsers are less granulating. Okay. Notice, so a few things here, and this will be not unrelated, Daniel, to your question. You have to be careful about what you infer here. I can't say that this means that this in fact means bunsers are more granulating than flick-flacks. This gibberish is so silly, but I can't say that that's definitely true here, or that they're even as granulating. I don't know yet. But it definitely seems to be, it definitely seems that the reason I thought flick-flacks were more granulating is toast. Okay, these locomotors tend to cancel out the Humperdinks, which is why I thought all this to begin with. Okay. So be careful about going too extreme, though. I can't say that this means that the original thought was definitely wrong. Flick-flacks are definitely, I'd have to read more to figure that out. I can't say that flick-flacks are definitely less granulating than bunsers now. Similarly, someone asked a question about this one in their rephrase. They talked about how this lets the cashew processors earn a profit. I don't know if that's true. I can't go so far as to say that, you know, if they sell at competitive prices, does that mean they earn a profit? I don't know that that's true. You want to be very careful about extending beyond the text. We are going to do a lot of rephrasing today, but you don't want to rephrase past what is justified. That is a general GMAT skill to practice. Okay, so just be on the lookout for that in the next several rephrases. Don't go beyond what the text allows. Let's try this one here. We'll skip. I have too many to do in the hour, but let's try this one. This is it's not an official sentence from a critical reasoning answer, but it's directly adapted from one. And I always found it very tough. So let's see how we do here. Again, don't give a high level summary here. I do want to, we're actually having to gnarl through the weeds in this exercise. That's part of the joy of today. So it's not just that the renovations will lead to more columns. That does seem to be true. But what is the sentence really driving at? Yeah, Alexander says the second half of the sentence really confuses me. You are not alone, I assure you. I see some good summaries here that are starting off pretty well. Let's get the first part out. People are doing pretty good on this first part here, right? There's a renovation proposal. Start with a simple thing. There's a renovation proposal. Okay, if it happens, if it is accepted, it seems like there will be an increase in the number of columns in the west wing. Let's just actually, let's even undo, that's too smart. Okay, that's too GMAT-y. Let's get more casual with this. Oh, I've got the rainbow wheel of death. Come on, Zoom, be good. Talk amongst yourselves. Here, I'll give you a topic. That's a dated SNL reference for those who are not sure. Come on, Zoom. Does this sometimes. It just has to be patient with it. Eventually it'll kick back in. I can have control of my computer once more. There we go. Okay, we're back. Say we're back, maybe we're not. Am I coming through? Let's actually just make sure my internet's still there. If you can hear me, type in the answer box that you can. I seem to have lost all control of Zoom. Well, YouTube land. Please no. Okay. Camera's frozen, mic is not. Okay, so I think we're back. Sorry, YouTube land, and those of you that are here. Technology, feast and famine. So this was too smart. Let's like, if it is accepted, let's just be like more columns will be put into the west wing. So this is where a lot of people are, they're saying basically the same thing that the sentence is. Okay, and sure, start there if you want, right? These new columns will not be, well, actually this is a little bit better than, right? They will not be taller columns. Right? The increase will not result mainly from an increase in the columns in the west wing that are comparatively tall. So that just means the new columns we put in will not be the taller columns. That means the new columns we put in will be medium to shorter, right? That's what that means. There's a renovation proposal. It's going to put some more columns in. The columns we put in are going to be medium or short, not the tall ones. That's all this means. Okay. Gnarly sentence. The increase will not result mainly from an increase in this. What? How frustrating. Pick it apart. What does it mean? What columns do we have? We have relatively tall and the others. Right? And so like pictures are also like, visual representations are nice. You know, it's like, so here are the columns in the west wing. Here are the columns we currently have. There are taller ones and relatively shorter ones. And this new version is going to put in new columns, but it's not going to be an increase in these taller ones, right? Or at least mainly. That's another fun thing. It says mainly. That's another issue about some of these sentences is that they get kind of vague with words like mainly. It could be, maybe there's one new tall column put in, but most of the new columns that we put in are the short or the medium. That's where most of them are. Okay. Yeah, there might be a few new tall ones, but that's not what mainly the increase is. The increase is mainly the other ones. What are the other ones? The short and the medium. So visual rep, like drawing a picture in your mind, can also be a really helpful exercise for this. Okay, and actually I meant to do this on this first one here, the Sepphoris mosaics. Right, here's a mosaic in Sepphoris, it has a motif. Here's my motif, it's a stick figure. Okay, either that motif, so here's Sephora, right? Either that motif does appear in other places or it does not. Other. Okay, it does or doesn't. So here are the motifs, whatever kind of motif this is, that do not appear in other places, but I'm told that there are no such motifs. No such motifs do not appear elsewhere. So this whole line is actually not allowed. We are only on this track. Okay, just you can actually draw a picture of the situation, of the story. Let's try this one here. I do want to do this sentence because this is such a common piece of grief, and it's a little bit different from the other sentences we've had to untangle today. But if you've ever seen a critical reasoning passage where your job is to say what job the bold-faced sentences in an argument are doing, you'll get used to like seeing cruddy sentences like this in the answer choices. And it's not as fun as a story as the ones we've been telling, but pick this thing apart. Turn it into, turn this into a simple deconstruction of many thoughts instead of this one. First, the sentence is defining its implications or at issue in the argument. The second, blah, blah, blah. What does that mean? Pick this apart. Tell it as a simple story. So there are two sentences. Let's start there. There are two sentences that I'll be looking at. The first is a finding. What is a finding? Oh, a discovery, maybe? Something we figured out. And so this finding, there are implications, right? This finding has implications. Or the finding could mean, right? What is an implication, right? It means the finding could mean something else is true. The argument is, like if something is at issue, what does it mean to be at issue? Well, it means it's debated or questioning. The argument is questioning that something else. Then there's the second sentence. is a claim or I mean, that's like an opinion. This claim is to argue we should not believe something from that discovery or due to that discovery. Okay, so the first is some discovery. Some people might think a fact about that discovery, that this means something. The second sentence, whatever it is, claims that no, you should not believe this thing. It is not entirely clear from this that these implications are the same implications. I know in the actual argument they are. But the point is like, hey, the second is saying don't believe something because of this discovery. The first is saying that, hey, some people believe something because of this discovery. The argument doubts that we should believe that thing. The second is a claim that says you shouldn't believe this thing or a thing because of the discovery. Okay. And then the question you would have to, if you pick this apart, it's like, okay, wait, just make sure we're clear. What is that something else? And what is this something else? Go back, you have to reach back into the passage and contextualize it, right? What is that something I'm not supposed to believe? What is this something I'm not supposed to believe? In this case, they end up being the same something. But that kind of generic, like a finding, a certain implication, it's like that vague crud. Go back and grab what it's referring to. Okay. All right, let's jump to dealing with multiple sentences. Let's start with this one here. This is a really good example, just a hint. This is a really good example of dealing with the first part last. You could deal with it first, I suppose, but I think this is a good example for how sometimes you have to work inside out from a like peel the onion. I guess this peeling an onion would be outside in, wouldn't it? So bad metaphor, but point is we have to like really pick at this thing piece by what, like what is going on here? Well, let's start with just the one thing I understand. There's 2 poppy seeds in a bowl, placed in a round bowl. Okay, so when we could place 2 poppy seeds into a bowl. What happens when we do that? When we do that, they roll to the center. And that means they get closer. But if we turn the ball over, and place seeds onto it, okay, they will get further apart. Now, what is the purpose of all this? Why are we talking about putting seeds in a bowl upside down or right side up? Why are we talking, right? See the bowl. We put 2 poppy seeds in the bowl and they roll towards each other. Again, images are nice. Or we can turn that bowl upside down and we can put a poppy seed here and here and they roll further away. And why are we talking about this? Well, we're something about these. Neither of these scenarios involves chance. They are, quote unquote, determined. The outcome is determined. But one of them shows how outcomes are unpredictable. Even when not chance. Even when there's no chance involved. Let's say luck instead of chance, because that sounds more like nihilism. There's no luck involved. That's what the first part is getting at. Okay. Why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about seeds in a bowl rolling towards each other, away from each other? Because this is something about unpredictability when it's non-chaotic, when there's no chance. It's a non-chaotic system. And pretty clearly, it's the one that is unpredictable is this one. This is clear. They're going to roll towards the center, the point attractor. Point attractor. This one enlarges initial differences. In presumably, and I might have to read more to get more details, but probably in a somewhat unpredictable way. It's hard to know exactly. We know they get further apart, but how much further apart? I don't know. It's hard to predict based on where they start. Okay. And notice I am not including every single word in the summary. So while this is about getting into the details here, I'm not reading every single word. Consider the non-chaotic system. I guess I looked at that. That's helpful because it really points out that this is deterministic. There's a not a predicted, but there's a clear outcome that's gonna happen. Okay. Lay out this story again for a 6th grade. Sometimes I call this like a 6th grade rewrite, a 6th grade summary. It's a really good practice in it, especially if you struggle with reading comp. Get away from the one-word summaries, or one-sentence summaries for when you need to pick apart a sentence. Turn it into several simpler sentences. Let's see. Let's do this one here. Let's jump to this is a full reading comp paragraph from an official GMAT passage. Having said that, It is, okay, so it's a full paragraph, but I think it's only 3 sentences. And again, this is why reading comp is so tough, because they pack a lot into 1 sentence or 3 sentences. And it's sometimes easier to like, no, let me write a simple, let me rephrase this to myself, maybe not in the same order. Let me understand what's going on here in simple, pithy points, not big, broad generalizations. Sentence. So 4 sentences. Start typing your 7th grade story for this one. Like start, you know, where's the key thought here? What's the key? It does, so that pithy first read place, right? That first, like, here's the general sense. That's often a good place to start. Start at that main thing. But then for situations when you do have to deal with the specifics, start making connections to that main thing here. So what's the main thing in this particular paragraph? Well, I'd say it's probably here. Okay. We thought, geologists thought, the rocks in the San Andreas Fault would be hotter than they are. That's the whole, right? Like the drill holes, all that. What's the point? What are we saying here? The temperature was not as high as we thought. They thought it'd be hotter. Okay. You could put the friction thing first. Right, done. I suppose it doesn't matter, but they thought the friction would cause a lot of heat. You can put that first or second, I don't know, but the point is they thought they'd be hot because of friction. Turns out they are not as hot as these people thought it would be. Okay, well, why is that? Some geologists thought it might be the kind of rock. made the temperatures low. Like, one thing I do like about this exercise is that you can keep emphasizing the point. Like here, they kind of stop. Yeah, they don't quite keep, they don't mention too much about temperature. Moving, I guess they do talk about it here, heat generated, but like keep re-emphasizing the main point of why we're having this discussion. Why is the temperature low? Well, maybe it's because of the type of rock. Okay. Well, why is the type of rock important? They thought the rocks were limestone and granite. Limestone and granite seem to cause lots of friction heat. Now they wondered if the rocks were clays. Some clays had been found in the zone. And why are clays important? Because under normal conditions, like in normal times, clay is not as it doesn't make as much friction. And that would mean or as much heat, right? So notice how simple that is. Childish. And that's not, I don't mean that as an insult. Like, this is what I'm trying to do when I do reading comp, and I have to dig into details. I'm trying to like tell it to myself like a child would. There are these rocks in the fault. They thought the friction would make it really hot. Then they found out, turns out they're not so hot. Well, they thought these rocks were granite or limestone. Those make a lot of heat. But now they were like, well, maybe it's clays. Maybe it's not limestone and granite, maybe it's clays. Clays don't make as much heat and friction. That could be it. Then the passage goes on to continue talking about this and what the next guesses were. But like getting this is about the first half of the passage is huge. You want to understand exactly why we care about clays, exactly why we care about this kind of rock. Remember that this is the first paragraph. This is where it starts. It just drops you kind of right into it. And it is important, even on a first read, it is important that you have a pretty good sense of the first chunk. That's where you do want to really ground yourself well, because everything's going to build on that. So turn it into a simple, childish story. Okay. Okay, let's see. Let's do one last question here. I want to show how this can also be useful in Quant. So this is a Quant question. But I'm just go ahead and read this and think about it, and I'll show you how a very similar game can be played here to set up this question right. Sonia, I just saw your summary. It was a good one. For the record, also, sorry, the chat box, the Q&A box doesn't show up as quick as the chat box does. Alexandra is also good. No, I know, Sonia, all the chat boxes are disabled for some reason. We can't use that, so I'm having to go through the Q&A box. It's just not as responsive as the chat box usually is. Okay, so what's going on in this particular example here? We have, a country used a weird way to compute income tax. What did you do? Well, first you take 2% of an income, and you're going to add that to something. And this is the tricky part, right? What is that something? Let's just put it as something for a second. We're going to add it, actually, so let's add it to an average. The difficulty here is like, what is that average? What am I averaging here? And this is where you have to be careful. Like, do I average 100 units? How do I average 100 units? Wait, 100 units and 1%. So I'm also take 1% of an income, add that to 100, and divide by 2. That's the average I'm taking. An average of these things, 100 units and 1% of an income. People get tripped up. They often say, like, well, it's 100 units divided by 100. What am I doing with that? Am I adding it to 1% of the income? No, hold up. What am I doing? I'm taking 1% of the income. I know that. Averaging that with 100 units, divide by 2. Okay, so then add that. This is the average to add to 2% of income. Okay, gnarly little sentence. Takes a second to parse through that second half. Specify what average you're getting, work through it, peel that onion, and get to where you need to get to set up that problem. All right, gang. That is the session today. Practice your 6th grade rewrites with single sentences, pairs of sentences, whole paragraphs. There are times where you can't just do the high-level summaries, where you do have to get into the nuance and the gnarly specifics here and really understand how they're fitting together. You don't have to take that information always in the information in the way it's given. Start where where it's most important or where you feel most comfortable starting, and then build the relationships out using the logic and context of the passage. Okay. And in an answer choice, right? Give yourself permission to slow down and like rephrase that sentence maybe into multiple sentences. Don't feel like you have to keep things as one sentence. One sentence does not mean one thought. And a lot of times building all the thoughts out is really the key. I'm going to end the recording now and stick around for any questions you all have. Those of you that are watching on YouTube, thank you very much. We will see you next time. Check out our other free resources I mentioned at the beginning. And if you're interested in an upcoming course, check that link. Hope to see you there. Study well.